Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Student Impact Report brought to you by the Student Basic Needs Coalition. I'm Taylor Allgood, joining you from Washington, D.C. And as you may know by now, I am joined today by Owen Tanner Flomberg of SBNC, co founder and co executive director of SBNC. This is our fifth episode of the season, so as always, if you haven't checked out our other episodes yet, be sure to do that on Spotify and YouTube. We have those linked in our Instagram link tree at SBNC underscore USA. But yeah, I know that there's a lot going on recently, and I want to really pick your brain on one particular topic for today, which is recent SNAP delays and budget cuts in the US. So, as we know, there have been recent disruptions to SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and that has really left millions of Americans, upwards of 42 million Americans, really feeling uncertain as they wait to receive federal benefits. And for college students, especially who face food insecurity and rely on SNAP to afford groceries, these delays can mean a lot of things. And so I want to really talk to you about what that means and kind of what's going on in the news today and make sense of that. I know there's been a lot of back and forth with different court orders and things. So I just want to kind of digest that a little bit and get your thoughts on, what this moment says about our priorities when it comes to feeding our people.
Yeah, well, thanks for that intro to this issue, Taylor. I'm sure most people have heard a little bit about this over the last couple weeks, with these SNAP payments being frozen for the vast majority of Americans. That, like you said, rely on this or these funds for their food. They really do, and for their children's food. And it's been heartbreaking to see over the last week or so, many families going without the payments that they're entitled to. And that's no different with our population that we serve at the Student Basic Needs Coalition, students in college and their families rely on these benefits. And when this money hasn't gone out, it's caused huge disruptions in so many people's lives. So we at SBNC have been following the news on this very carefully since really the early days of the shutdown, when this started to become a possibility. And we've been following the litigation and tracking all this very closely and trying to keep students up to date as to when they could expect to have their applications processed, if they have pending applications, as well as when to expect the funding for those or the funds on their EBT card for those that are already receiving the benefit of SNAP.
So, a lot of our work focuses on breaking stigma, and a lot of folks may not even fully understand the intersection of food insecurity and higher ed. And so, for those who may not have the context, can you just start with the basics of just explaining what do these SNAP freezes look like for college students who rely on SNAP? Have you heard anything about, what the effects are of this? Or are you hearing from campuses what they're trying to do to support these affected students?
Yeah, so we've been hearing a lot from on the ground. I think one big trend that I've found really positive, and we've seen this in campus communities across the country, is when these payment EBT or SNAP payment freezes kind of went into place at the start of this month, and money didn't go out. We did a lot to encourage campuses, and lots of other national organizations did a lot to encourage campuses to really try to beef up their on-campus food pantry. And I know, Taylor, you've got a lot of familiarity with campus food pantries. Many of our campus partners are campus food pantries or people that are involved with them. But it's been really, really great to see like these food pantries and whatnot really step up and try to meet this demand. There are various statistics out there about how much food assistance comes from food pantries versus SNAP. SNAP being the primary driver of food assistance in the U.S. Because it's so much more efficient in one way, and it's just a huge, huge program. And food banks and food pantries, campus ones and community ones, cannot keep up with all the demand. So sometimes I think it's good to remind people that while resources like campus food pantries and food pantries in the larger community do exist, still most of the need that's out there is being met by SNAP and similar programs. So they're not really a replacement for the public benefit. So yeah, it's been really great to see campuses step up and try to address this. We at Student Basic Needs Coalition have been encouraging students because there's been this real growth and awareness around SNAP. And I think a lot of stigma reducing efforts inadvertently have been going on right now as we see restaurants and local communities talk about supporting folks that missed their SNAP payment earlier this month. And I think, all that can, I think, serve as like a stigma reducer. So we've seen more interest on our screener, our SNAP screener that SBNC has, in the last 2 weeks than we've had over the last several months. So really, really traffic has increased. And hopefully when this is all done, and hopefully the government reopens here and this money starts flowing, students will be more open to applying for these benefits and receiving them and understanding that uh, getting help is not a bad thing.
Yeah, thanks for providing some of that context. I was actually just going to ask that next, because as SBNC is an organization, dedicated to helping students get access to SNAP and other essential resources, I was, curious to hear more about how you all have been responding to these challenges and how you've been helping students kind of navigate some of this confusion or some of these delays. Because, even for myself working in this field, I've been losing track a little bit. I'm like, is SNAP reinstated in some areas? Is it not? But I actually just heard from a student that I had worked with that they were still able to be accepted for SNAP recently. So I'm not sure if they're currently able to access it yet. I'm not sure, but it's still good to know that at least there's still a little bit of movement, and hopefully, like you said, everything can be restored soon. Um, but yeah,
A lot of state agencies and county agencies that administer the program have really stepped up, and we've really seen local communities, people of all political stripes, really stepping up and speaking out about this, raising awareness, trying to do that direct assistance. And I think it's good. Obviously we don't want this issue to exist in the first place, but I think it's people at the top that don't seem to get it. Um, so many people in the local community, and a lot of the communities that we work with have really, really stepped up and tried to help folks out. And hopefully we'll be on the other side of this shutdown soon, but we'll see.
so my last question for you as it relates to this is kind of zooming out a little bit, and there's always been this debate around whether federal programs like SNAP should fall under government responsibility. And so I guess my question about that is, what would you say, or what are your thoughts on, folks who might say that feeding our population, including students, shouldn't be a federal priority, that it's a matter of personal choice or private charity.
Yeah, and that definitely is, a narrative out there and I think to your point, where that narrative goes is, if this is not the government's job, someone has to feed these, people that need support, or people could get very sick and ill and, even starve. And there's all this, impact on children too. Even going through brief periods of intense hunger can have lifelong effects on a child's body and their mind. So, in response to that narrative is, what kind of society do we want to live in? And I think most people want, and just talking to people again of all political stripes, want to live in a society where we care for each other. Maybe we don't provide everything to everybody, but there's some base level of support that, folks can rely on. And SNAP has been that for Americans for decades and decades, generations, really, at this point. And it is one of the most effective anti-poverty mechanisms ever created. And part of the beauty of SNAP is the way, and I think, maybe some people that may espouse the narrative that you just outlined here of like, why is this, maybe government shouldn't be doing this, um, can admit and hopefully acknowledge how the program really is market based in a lot of ways. Is in the old days of food stamps, which predicate or came before SNAP as we know it. Now there was a lot more restriction on like what people could use their dollars on. Um, it wasn't like a cash or almost like a cash equivalent based system in the same way in its early days. And as it's progressed into more of like I'm describing here, a market uh, based solution or program, it puts dollars in people's pockets, and then they can go buy the food and other qualifying items that best fit with their lifestyle and their culture and uh, where they live, because we know food in many ways is geographic too. So yeah, so I think thinking that this program does not help people, does not, or is not, maybe government's job, is not really reflective of reality. But I think, teasing that out even further is, maybe people think that college students should not have SNAP, for example. We hear that a lot in our work is, um, maybe that's not what SNAP was designed for. But it's really important to recognize that like who a college student is now is not the same as a college student in 1960. College students are much more diverse. They're on average older. They're more likely to have children than they did decades ago. And I think that further necessitates the need to have robust access for college students to access SNAP benefits, because at the end of the day, when we give SNAP benefits to a student and help them graduate, it improves their earning capacity over their whole life. So then they're not relying on these benefits, which goes, I think, directly to that narrative of, are we just going to put people on SNAP forever? If there's people that don't want that, giving SNAP and providing access to college students that can graduate and have better earning potential for the rest of their life is a great way to prevent folks from having or needing to rely off of programs like this.
Absolutely. That was my thought too, is just in response to that, argument or that belief that, public benefits programs like SNAP create dependency or use taxpayer dollars. In reality, I feel like the stronger the access that people have to food, the more that they can contribute to society, like you said, and the stronger our economy is, and the stronger our health outcomes are. And I think that really maybe it is my personal belief, but I do think that the government, should make sure that food access isn't just at the will of the wealthy or the people who, have the capacity to give and donate. And and so, yeah, I think that, we all have a part to play, and food is not a favor by any means. I think it's a human right. And so, if, our government is not meeting that basic need for people, then how can they, advance or contribute, if their basic needs aren't being met? And so, yeah, I think that's just a good point.
Exactly. And it's a great program. 1 in 8 Americans are relying on it, depending on it. And I think the last couple weeks have really shown us how, and I think raise people's awareness about like even what SNAP is and what it means and the impact that it has on people and honestly the economy as a whole, because SNAP dollars, there's a multiplier on them for every dollar invested in a SNAP. More than a dollar gets put into the local economy where those SNAP dollars are allocated.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your insight on this today. I know this is a topic that touches both of our areas of work very closely. So it's always nice to pick your brain on that and get some insight since, you're, doing this work every day and really breaking it down for people and making not only the program accessible for students, but also making awareness and education about that accessible. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, always happy to talk about SNAP, especially with it being in the news. And we'll see by the time folks hear about this if payments have resumed or not. And if they haven't by our next episode, we'll probably be talking about it a little bit too. Um, but let's all keep our fingers crossed that that money gets out to folks, whether it be through the courts or through um, congressional action here.
Well, stay tuned, everyone, because next up I'll be speaking with Mark Hawk, a law student and national student leader, about his journey in public service and his perspective on how federal policy changes, like the new graduate loan caps, could shape access to higher education. Mark J. Hawks III is a dedicated public servant and advocate from Chicago and Huntsville, Alabama. A proud Oakwood University graduate and 2024 30 Under 30 honoree, Mark earned his BA in political science pre-law and has completed all coursework for a Master of Public Administration at Jacksonville State University. He is currently pursuing his JD at the University of the District of Columbia, David A. Clark School of Law, class of 2027, where he serves in student government and leads multiple student organizations. Mark was recently elected Law Student at Large on the American Bar Association Board of Governors for the 2025-2026 bar year, representing all ABA accredited law students nationwide. His professional background includes roles as the U.S. House of Representatives Constituent Liaison, lead campaign director with the outreach team, and training associate with the Democratic National Committee. Wow, welcome, Mark. You're incredible.
Thank you so much for having me, Taylor, and thank you for the compliment. That's so kind.
Well, thanks for joining me today. I know we have some great stuff to talk about. I definitely want to learn a little bit more about your academic background and your interests, as well as gauge your thoughts on some pressing topics today, including recent caps to graduate student loans as pushed out by the current administration. So, just to get us started, Mark, you've built a career that bridges public service, law, and student leadership from your time at Oakwood University to your current work as a law student at UDC and your role on the American Bar Association Board of Governors. So, can you share how your journey led you into student advocacy and public service?
Sure, that's a great question and actually one of my favorites. Mainly because I think I know that leadership was kind of written into my story from the start. I'm the oldest of seven kids. I'm the oldest of four boys, so I had to learn early on to look out for others. And it really started in church and school. I'm also a PK. And if you don't know what that is, it's a pastor's kid. And so we're kind of thrown in the mix. We're kind of thrown in the front. We're kind of given leadership roles early on. And I always knew that I wanted to do what I'm doing today. In ninth grade, there was an opening in student government, and I wouldn't stop pestering my teacher about it until she gave me the role. I think it was like sergeant at arms or something like that. And that one opportunity changed my entire life, to be honest with you. I ended up serving all the way to senior year, becoming student government president. And I would say that these are one of the moments that really shaped me. But one moment in high school that truly shaped me was when there was a coach who was being unfairly treated. And instead of just talking about it, I probably didn't do it the right way, but instead of just talking about it, I went around gathering petitions and organizing students to stand up for him. And that's when I realized that advocacy was my lane. I did the same thing in college, served, organized, spoke up. And by my last year, right before graduation, I started a job at the DNC, and that opened the door to campaign politics and eventually Capitol Hill. So for me, student leadership was really never about me. It was always about those who I served. It was always about the people who were counting on me to show up and to show out for them.
That's amazing. And I resonate with a lot of what you say. For many leaders, I feel like it starts young. It starts by, having that story early on that serves as your motivation throughout your career. So that's awesome. I know that you've held roles across student government, campaigns, and higher education, as you mentioned. So, how have those experiences also shaped the way that you approach leadership and policy work today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think honestly, those experiences really keep me grounded and humble in this life. When I worked for the congressman, he taught me something that stuck with me ever since, and it was to always speak to everyone in the room, from the custodian to the chief of staff, and to treat them all with the same respect. So I carry that with me. People probably see me at school and they're like, "Why do you know so and so's name?" And I'm like, "Because they service us, and I'm a servant leader and they're a servant leader, and so we have to stick together and we have to ensure that we're giving each other that acknowledgement, because leadership is hard. Leadership is not easy. You have wins, you have loss, but it all comes down to carrying yourself with kindness. And I think even me, when I'm underestimated, basically because I'm 24, I'm young, I'm black, and sometimes I'm soft spoken. My mom probably wouldn't agree, but people don't always expect much from me. I learned from my very first campaign that my meekness isn't a weakness, it's really a strength. It gives me the room to listen. It gives me the ability to lead with empathy and also to surprise people with excellence instead of ego. That's probably one thing that I aim for mostly in this life, is to be excellent at what I do and who I serve. In my first campaign, I managed over, I think, like 100 canvassers, and it was a very massive operation. I was like 21, I think, and I was shocked. I didn't know where I was. I knew where I was, in Vegas, but it was just so overwhelming. But I learned to be motivated with purpose, and that's how I approach leadership and policy today. Is with humility, is with heart, and the belief that real change actually starts by being the change that you seek. Obama taught me that years ago.
Wow, I have the chills already. We're only the second question in. And speaking of leadership, you're representing all law students nationwide right now through your ABA position. What drew you to that level of advocacy, and what issues are you most passionate about elevating through your platform?
Yeah, it's that's such a great question, and ABA, it's probably one of my favorite things right now. Being on the board of governors, I got to meet so many people, but also being on the law student division, which makes me the chair of the resolutions committee, and that gives me the ability to bring forth, along with the committee, to bring forth resolutions to the overall law student division, which then go to the ABA House of Delegates, which potentially could be voted as policy within the ABA, from their House of Delegates. I guess for me, honestly, I wanted a seat at the table, and I did my research, and I did not find anybody that in my research that was from a HBCU law school that was in that role. And I decided that if not the first, I would be somebody who could really bring change. And the president of the ABA reminded me that to be at the table. I was at an event and I was told to sit one place, but the president, she was president elect at the time, and she said, be at the table. Literally moved me and put me at the table. And that is honestly something that sticks with me today. I'm always telling myself, be at the table. Not behind the table, but be at the table. And I've seen firsthand how decisions about students actually affect law students. Decisions about students, especially law students, are made without us in the room. And I wanted to change that. And now that I'm representing law students nationwide, at least ABA accredited law students who attend law schools that are ABA accredited, I think it's over 190. It gives me a different type of opportunity to really serve. And a very niche field, a niche area, being that it's law and it's specifically law school, different than any of my other experiences. But I'm passionate about elevating issues that hit closest to me, to home, things like barriers that Black and brown students, and all students, but Black and brown students face when it comes to LSAT and bar passage rates, student debt, and access to opportunity. Right now, I'm really focused on conversations surrounding tuition reform, like graduate loan policies. I know we'll get to this, but like the recent legislation that Congress has passed to eliminate Grad Plus loans, that kind of change would directly impact law students in the future, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds. So for me, this role is about making sure voices are heard and decisions are made, not after. Our decisions heard before, and decisions are made with us at the considered and being in the room at the table. For me personally, I have 3 specific resolutions that I'm considering right now. I have not met with committee yet, but I have 3 resolutions that are really close to home for me, and I have devoted a bit of time to kind of parse those out and really make sure that when this comes to the House of Delegates floor, that it's something that it resonates really with people, because right now we're in a different type of environment. It's new to us. For a lot of us Gen Zers, we've never seen this type of, I would say, political uncertainty that actually bleeds over and spills over into our education, into our livelihood, into every part of us. So it's definitely a new day in America.
Absolutely. And since you bring it up, I want to talk about the recent federal graduate loan caps outlined in the Department of Education's new policy proposals. As someone like yourself who's pursuing a JD, what impacts do you see these caps having on law students and other professional degree seekers?
Uh, I I spent days before the legislation actually passed the Senate and the House. I believe that it passed the Senate and the House. I've learned some new things about how that was able to be done, specifically from my con law professor, actually. So interesting. But I've been disheartened by this situation. I was checking Reddit every day to see updates. I was trying to see if it was going to pass, what the effects would be, and my worst nightmare came true. Honestly, these new loan caps have major consequences. To my understanding, like as I said, the policy has already passed Congress and the House of Representatives and Senate, and it could change the entire landscape of graduate education, not only law school, but graduate education. There's caps. I don't want to misquote them, but there's caps. I would urge everybody to look at the legislation. And I also won't cite the bill because I don't want to call the bill what it is. And I have another name for the bill, but it may not be appropriate for this forum. But for law students, especially those at HBCU institutions or private institutions, specifically like Howard, it means fewer options to fund your degree through federal aid and more reliance on private loan. And that's not just a financial issue, it's an access issue. For many of us, federal loans are the only reason we can even afford to pursue law school in the first place. For a lot of people who are first generation and who come from marginalized backgrounds, getting approved for these private loans are very, very difficult. Most of the time, some of these people don't even have the credit for it. And that is all due to systemic issues that are beyond our control.
Some advocates argue that these limits could push new students, especially those in high cost or licensure-based programs, toward private loans, or even out of the field entirely, as I was mentioning. So, do you share that same concern?
I mean, that's the goal. When you look at it, and I don't mean to be I don't mean to be cynical, but I want to be real. The goal is to push people out of those fields entirely. We are in a time where the rule of law is under attack. And we look at these marginalized people, and they are from backgrounds where private loans are difficult to achieve to obtain, fewer protections, and no forgiveness options. I don't even want to step in the private realm area. I'm so grateful. I'm so blessed that I'm grandfathered in. But these caps push students into that space, and if they do, or discourage them from applying altogether, it'll make the profession less diverse. And that's dangerous because we already know the legal field isn't reflective in a lot of fields, not just the legal field, but those fields aren't reflective of the people it serves. Most of the time I meet people and I tell them, and they tell me, even attorneys, practicing attorneys, my clients don't look like me. They look like the people that are going to be pushed out of these fields. And we honestly can't afford to lose more voices at the table, because we have to make sure that those voices are heard. We have to get into good trouble like John Lewis tasked us with. And this bill makes it more difficult for us to get into good trouble. I'll put it this way. I always heard this thing where it was like you could do things with a high school diploma, and then you could do things with a bachelor's degree, but now a bachelor's degree won't even get you in the door to make more than $45,000 a year. And so now you need a master's degree, but it's hard to obtain because these new limits. So granted that we are grateful because we've already gone through and we've matriculated through these programs, but what about my younger siblings that come behind me? They may not have this access. They may not have the privilege to be able to rely on these loans, which we have every intention to pay back. And we actually will make great contributions to our field. But now we have a lack of access. So therefore, there's going to be less diversity in these fields. Historically, first gens and their parents don't even get approved. As I said, don't even get approved for these loans, these private loans. And the interest rates are out of this world. Honestly, when looking at, to answer your question about like, or this, to respond to the statement about what we do to move forward, we legislate. We get at the tables, to get to be seen at the tables. The ones of us who've already matriculated through, who've already have the MPAs, who have the MPPs, who have the JDs and the MBAs and all these other degrees, and who know how to legislate and who have been staffers, we have to be seen at the table. We have to call our representatives. We have to call our state and local representatives as well, and push them towards acknowledging that these fields are going to be less diverse simply because a lot of these people come from poverty and they don't have access, but yet they're brilliant, but they lack access.
You're absolutely right. It is intended for that purpose to keep marginalized groups out of higher education, and even those who do choose to invest, education is so costly now that, you're coming out of grad school or law school with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt sometimes if you don't secure a funding or scholarship. And that just creates what a whole lifetime of being in this cycle of debt. I know institutions as well have been put in a tricky spot of, complying with federal demands while also trying to ensure that they support and maintain the students and retain the students that they do currently have in their programs. So from your perspective, how can law schools and professional programs better support students, not just with academics, but especially when it comes to matters like mental health, food security, financial stability, and really that holistic support that a student needs?
That's a profound question. And I think schools, period, need to start treating students like whole people, not just future professionals. The pressure is real, between tuition, rent, family responsibilities, the mental toll of work. Students are carrying a lot. And if I could be transparent, I don't like the law school culture. I actually hate it. I hate the hustle and the bustle. I hate the promotion of anxiety, the promotion of hazing, and all those different things when we are already entering into a tumultuous field. We do not need to continue to perpetuate that standard in the education. And that is the first step that organizations and law schools, schools, graduate schools, medical schools, PT schools, dental schools, every school can take to kind of eradicate the hazing, the pressure, the mental anguish, all these things that come with obtaining or attempting to obtain this education. That is the perfect way. Beyond that, support has to go beyond academic advising. That means building real systems, on campus food pantries. My school has one, and I'm actually considering going to going to kind of like cop some items. You know, it's a great opportunity to know that in time of need, we have these resources, but every school is not like that. Accessible counseling, emergency funds, professors who model empathy, not just expectations. All these things come into play with addressing mental health, food security, or financial stability. For me, support looks like creating a culture where it's okay to say, yo, like I'm struggling and still be seen as capable, because success in school and law school shouldn't come at the cost of your peace or your health. And I've seen that happen to a lot of people. I've witnessed that. I've witnessed people not eat, not sleep, not take care of their health, not just in law school, but in medical school, all type of different fields, pharmacy school, all types of different fields, just at the cost of, or just because their education is much more important to them than their health, because they have something to lose. Whereas some people are sent to school, and this is not a shot at individuals who have privilege, because I too have privilege in my life. And my father taught me that a long time ago. I went to school, I transferred to a private school in 7th grade. And I told my dad, like, Dad, all these kids have all this and this, that, and the other, and we're here on scholarship, and they have all this privilege. And he told me, son, one day you too are going to benefit from privilege, but it's up to you as to how you use that to benefit others. And my dad was right. I did benefit from privilege eventually, right? In so many areas of my life. Doesn't take away from my life experiences, but it does highlight the fact that privilege comes in many shapes, ways, and forms. And I think that in order to make sure that everyone is seen and heard, we have to start there. We have to support, we have to care, and we genuinely just have to check in and say, it's okay to not be okay today.
Absolutely. Looking ahead, what gives you hope about the future of student advocacy? And or what advice would you give to students who are in this fight and want to use their education and their, as you mentioned, privilege comes in many different forms, including education. So what advice would you give to those students who want to use their platform, their privilege, their education to make systemic change?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what gives me hope is seeing the new generations of students who aren't afraid to speak truth to power. I consider myself one of those people. Of course, you learn how to do it, and I learned from the ninth grade situation with getting the petitions that there's a way to make good trouble, and there's a way to go about it. But you organize, you run for leadership roles, run for those council seats, run to be mayor, run to be state senator, run to be United States congressperson and senator, if you're at the age requirement. Build communities that care about care and justice, not how you can make your pockets fatter, but about caring and making sure people have access to justice. And if you go through life with that mindset, at least speaking to me looking ahead, if we have more people going through life with the mindset of not obtaining wealth, because obviously we all have loans to pay back, we all have mouths to feed and our own mouths to feed, right? But we can't let that be we can't let that motivate us, because you get jaded if you allow yourself to be motivated, and you in turn become an individual who is not a servant leader, or who does not care about the interests of others but their own interests. And so the best way to avoid that is to continue to do what we do. Use your education as a tool, not a title, not just get 1,000,001 degrees just to say you have them, but to use them and to elevate others so that they too can then could be on a platform to use to effectuate change in others' lives. For me, it's not about climbing the ladder. It's about widening it for someone else. When I was on Capitol Hill, I wanted to make sure that every one of the interns that I oversaw, that I mentored, that I supervised, got a role. One of my interns got a role at that time that was making more than me, that was in another office, but we facilitated that for her because we knew how difficult it was for specifically certain people and marginalized individuals to be in these roles. And so that could have been an easy moment for me to be jealous, for me to have an ego, but instead it was about humility in that moment because the impact is bigger. I don't have to be in every room, but if I can effectuate change in so-and-so's life, they're in that room. And so what I gave them, in the sense of the advice, in the sense of the hope, in the sense of the motivation, that is then going to be carried to the next person and to the next person and to the next person. And then we can eradicate poverty, we can eradicate violence, we can eradicate meanness and all these different things that are not good. And I think that the change that we want to see won't be overnight. And this is the advice to people. The change that you want to see won't be overnight. And I urge you not to be hasty, not to be rushful in trying to seek that change. A lot of times you have to just sit back and just think about it and really strategically think it out. Like the same people who are in this country who are trying to dismantle systems like the Department of Education that has been put in place to give us education, we have to be strategic as well in making sure we combat that. Not rushful, but strategic, and making sure we have actual agendas, actual strategies, so that we can make sure access is for everybody and not just for the 1%. For me, I always decide to lead with purpose and compassion. And that has carried me a long way. My mom always told me that I can do whatever I put my mind to. And I tell people the same thing now. I tell my mentees the same thing. You can do whatever you put your mind to. If there's someone who's telling you that you're not capable, that you're not worthy, that's a lie. You are worthy and you are capable. You just have to find the belief in yourself to be able to go forward and effectuate that change that is needed in this country, in this world, and even our local communities.
Wow. I saw a quote at this conference I attended recently, that reminds me of the essence of what you're saying, that individually we are just one drop, but together, we're the whole ocean, right? Like, I think that is the way forward, is understanding and honing our collective power and our collective ability to affect change. I think that doesn't just bring a message of hope, but that is truly the way forward, is to realize, what we can do together, and making these platforms, making these positions, bringing a seat to the table for others. Like, I think that is really the core motivating factor for a lot of people, and that's the way that we're going to affect the most change. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your perspective on student leadership and public service and the evolving landscape of higher education and policy. I just really appreciate the work that you're doing to advocate for students nationwide. And I'm really just leaving this conversation feeling truly inspired. Like, you shared so many profound insights, and I was really happy to speak with you today.
Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for having me. Thank you to the SBNC team. And this is such an amazing opportunity. And I hope that when people see this, that they are also inspired and that they understand that it starts with one person. John Lewis was one John Lewis, and you too can be that one person.
Mm. Well, everyone, we were just speaking with Marc J. Hawks III, dedicated public servant, advocate, and JD candidate at the University of the District of Columbia, David A. Clark School of Law. That wraps up this week's episode of the Student Impact Report. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at SBNC_USA, and you can also catch all of our episodes on Spotify and YouTube. See you next time.